Right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I think I'm supposed to wait a little bit more for people to trickle in from the lounge. For those of you who didn't join the first session last month, I think there is a recording of it somewhere. Maybe TechUp can help share that later. So this is actually a second part to the whole talk. In the first part, we covered the basics of blockchains and blockchain 1.0. And for the second part, we will cover blockchain 2.0 with Ethereum as the example that we're looking at, and specifically looking more into smart contracts. Yeah. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask that as well. We'll wait for a few minutes before we get in to the meat of the content. If you have watched it or you've heard about crypto before, feel free to ask any questions as well, and I'll see if I can answer it either now or sometime during the presentation. Right, so we have a couple more people in. While we're waiting, I guess I can just show the overview from the previous session, just to have a quick recap of what was covered. Yeah, so we covered some preamble, some common terms and misconceptions that people have, basic concepts about what money is and what decentralization is, looking at features that apply for blockchain 1.0. Things like block explorers, wallets and nodes, mining and exchanges. All right, I think I'll just get started now. And a quick note, so I just had my second vaccine earlier, so I might have a bit of a runny nose. Apologies for that. Right. So let me go to full screen. So this is covering blockchain 2.0, specifically with the example of Ethereum, and looking at what smart contracts bring to the table on top of what blockchain 1.0 brought. So in simple terms, blockchain 2.0, if blockchain 1 was about decentralized money, then blockchain 2 is about smart contracts. And smart contracts, again, sound like this term that's jargony that you don't really know what it means. But if you think about just some real life examples first. So think of a vending machine. And if you were someone from 100 years ago, a vending machine would be something that you consider magical. Like you won't understand how something like this can exist, because you put in like a slip of paper, maybe like a 1 ringgit or 2 ringgit note, and you press a button, and somehow the machine knows to give you exactly a can of Coke if you picked it, and if you give like 5 ringgit or $5, it will give you like $3 in return because the can costs $2. And at no point is a human involved. It's like magically given to you, the can and the remaining change. And people in the 21st century or even in the 20th century already know that this is nothing new. All that is happening behind the scenes is that there are a bunch of if functions or conditional statements that is encoded into the machine. So the code will check if the user gives $5, and if the user like presses on the Coke button, then it will drop 1 can from the shelf that's labeled as Coke, and it will give change of 5 minus $2 equals 3. So that's actually pretty straightforward what a vending machine does. And if you think about another one of these like hyped things other than blockchain, there's this Internet of Things. And one of the common examples that people use for Internet of Things is this smart refrigerator, where the fridge is smart because let's say you put in some eggs inside the fridge. It knows when your eggs are running out, and it will automatically go and make a purchase order online to the nearest grocery store for it to send some eggs to your house, so that you never have to like worry about your eggs running out. You just let the smart fridge make the orders for you. And this is extremely powerful, but as if you were to recall from the earlier part of the talk, this again relies on a centralized banking system or financial system, because what's actually happening is you're making an order to a online store, and it has your credit card details, and it will check with your bank to process that transaction for you. So you still require a third party like a bank for this to work. So what blockchain 2.0 does with smart contract is that smart contracts allow you to make these purchases without requiring a third party. So it combines that decentralized money nature of Bitcoin with this if-then function of the vending machine to be able to execute transactions automatically for you. And this sounds a bit simple when you first hear it, like what's so special about these smart contracts? But in actual fact, it is, I would equate the transformation that it provides, like when we shifted from the normal, like boring old mobile phone to smartphones that Apple introduced with the iPhone. With your like normal old mobile phone, you had some apps. You could call, you could text, you could maybe go on like a limited browser and have some games or a camera. But when the iPhone came out and it brought with it the App Store, then anyone in the world who could program could create these applications, and they didn't have to be an Apple employee. They didn't have to be a Sony Ericsson or Nokia employee. They can create their own apps and list it on the Apple's App Store, and they can sell their product directly. So it completely opened up the space for that, so that anyone in the world, like thousands of developers out there in the world, can create their applications, and users can use these applications on the Apple iPhone. So similarly, where the blockchain 1.0 was about having money, decentralized money, you can send money to someone and you can receive it from someone else. But with having these smart contracts, you can create many more applications on top of simply sending and receiving money. Example I like to use is that with Bitcoin, you can't do such a thing as pay someone their salary automatically. You actually have to, at the end of every month, you have to check that, okay, this guy is still working for me, and his salary is, let's say, 5K. Then I have to open up my Bitcoin wallet and manually do a send transaction to send the 5K equivalent to this person. But with smart contracts, I can create code such that it checks certain conditions. So this person is still working for my company. He hasn't had any disciplinary issues, and the salary is still at 5K. Then automatically, when these conditions are met and the time comes, then the 5K can be released from a wallet address that has this smart contract baked in directly to the user. So you don't have to go through this almost like Stone Age method of like paying manually. You can automate this thing. Another analogy I like to use other than smartphones and phones is think of like your calculator. So depending on where you are in the world, you probably had certain like smart calculators when you were in high school. That I think mine was something like a TI-84. So it had some sort of smartness. Like you could use it for certain things, and if you were very smart, you can actually like program things that it wasn't meant to do things beyond just calculating numbers. But it's very limited. Like it's all that it does. It's very good at what it does, but that's all that it does. You can't use it to like play movies or play games. But when you open up from having just a calculator to having like a computer or a laptop, then you can do many other things other than just calculating numbers. So it's a huge step forward in what blockchain can do. And I'm from Malaysia, so this is an example I love to give to the people in Malaysia, especially today of all days with some recent political news. But for a very long time, for years and years, a lot of Malaysians would complain about voting because there's this problem of when I go to the polling booth and I pick one side, that maybe I want to pick the blue party instead of the red party, and I cross it out in a piece of paper and I put it in the box. But I don't know when I go back home whether someone behind the scenes is actually changing my blue vote to a red vote, or vice versa. And I have to trust this election commission, who may historically have not had the best of reputations, and I don't have any choice about it. Even if I were to be able to vote online, there is no guarantee that the choice that I make on the website is actually the choice that gets calculated in the back end. If the website is closed source and people can't see the code that is powering it. But imagine an alternative world where you have votes held on the blockchain and with smart contracts. So what the smart contract would do would be to check, like, if Harith is registered to vote and Harith is a part of this particular constituency. He's above 21. He hasn't had any issues that block him from being able to vote. And extremely importantly, he hasn't actually voted in this particular election yet. And only if these conditions are met, then Harith's vote get accepted on the blockchain and it's put on there. And when I go back home and I check on this block explorer that tracks the blockchain transparently, I can still see that my vote is still, let's say, for the blue party, and it hasn't been changed to the red one. And I know because the blockchain is public and has thousands of witness nodes that no central party is hijacking or manipulating the vote that I've put in. So this is an example. In reality, elections on the blockchain are a lot more complex than what I described, and we're nowhere near getting to that stage. But it gives you an example, especially if you're in a country similar to where I am, then this is a real use case that you can apply to your lives. I'll go over other use cases out there. So there is this thing called initial coin offering, which was very popular maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So if you heard about blockchain before, you probably might have heard about this thing. So I want to clarify first that all of these, so what ICOs are fundraising. So it's a play of words on IPO, which is initial public offering. So it's a way for a lot of startups to raise funds when they are starting their business. And I want to clarify that, most of these that were done were probably scams, and even those that were not scams will probably fail just because they want to do something that is extremely ambitious. But I'm not gonna talk about like what ICO you should buy or stuff like that. What matters is what the ICO technology has allowed people to do. What it has allowed is, if you were a normal investor, you don't have connections, you're not rich, you're not a VC in San Francisco or Shanghai, you are able to invest at a very early stage in potentially the next Google or the next Alibaba when they're just starting out. So it breaks that a barrier for a normal person to be able to invest. And conversely, if you were an entrepreneur and you don't have connections to big VCs in Silicon Valley or Shanghai, you can raise a lot of funds from anywhere in the world. All you have to do is have a good description of what your project does. You can show an early stage version of your product, and anyone in the world with access to the internet, maybe to Twitter or Reddit or any other websites that they can know more about your product, can invest in you. So you don't have to give up a big chunk of your company ownership to some VC that may have a conflict of interest against the long-term future of your company. And I'm not saying these things out of a theoretical example. I've actually had my own experience participating, and this was, mind you, 4 years ago. Even back then, it was already a superior technology and user experience compared to what you would face in the normal world. So to give an example, there are these things called equity crowdfunding, at least in the country I'm in Malaysia, called ECF. And these are licensed by the Central Bank and Securities Commission. And you can buy stock of a local company before they go public. So it's meant to be a way for like small investors like myself to be able to invest in early stage companies. But I went through this experience. I went to their website. I transferred using my bank account online, and I sent some amount of money. And the next day I wake up and they've sent me an email to say that, by the time my payment was sent over, their cap had already been reached. So there was no space left for me and they had to refund the money. And, that sucks, but it's not the biggest problem. As long as they refund the money back to me, I'm not too concerned. But I had to wait and wait and wait. And only after more than a month did the refund get back to my bank account. And if it wasn't because it was a licensed operation by the Central Bank and Securities Commission, I would have panicked about the money that I had, taken away from my account to give to someone. And if you compare that to ICO done with smart contracts, when you make a payment, let's say on Ethereum, you send a transaction, the smart contract can have code that check whether, this address, is it whitelisted? Like it's done, it's know your customer details. Is it sending more than the individual cap that's been set? And if it is sending more, or if the total cap has been met, then automatically refund that amount back to that same wallet. So it took me barely seconds or at most minutes to get money back to my account if I were to make a transaction that was too late. And this isn't a fault of that company, of that ECF company. It was primarily because they had to go through the centralized third parties, accountants, finance staff of the banks, of the related companies involved in the entire operation. And at each step, it required a manual person to check. And if you can automate all of that, then what took me more than a month would have taken me only barely seconds or minutes. And just to show, this is even from just 2020. Even after the peak of the last bubble, 2020 was a bear market in the cryptocurrency or blockchain space, but still people raised hundreds of millions of dollars using this ICO mechanism. Next is what's called decentralized autonomous organizations. So the short term is DAO, and again, it's one of these jargony words. But in short, I'll give you an analogy to explain. So if you think about Uber and Lyft and Grab, all these ride-hailing services, for a long time they've talked about doing driverless cars so that they don't have to have human drivers, so they can cut down on their costs and things like that if they can use driverless cars. So think of a DAO as not just a driverless car, but a humanless Uber. So you can have an Uber without any human staff or employees. Like it's run entirely by code. And how that would work is that imagine there's this driverless car. It knows where to send you, the passenger, from point A to point B. And it also has smart contracts to take in your payment that you would pay online. And using the contract code, it would say, the money has been transferred. It will direct it to a treasury account that manages the entire company. And the driverless car has code that tells it to, let's say, check every once a month to send itself to maintenance at a workshop. and it will drive itself to the workshop. And when it pays the workshop, it will pay automatically again from the treasury using the smart contract code. And at no point would you need a human to be involved in the finance or HR or legal part of that entire operation. This sounds extremely radical and idealistic, and also with its own problems. In reality, it's probably not going to happen for the next, say, 20 years or so. But we've already seen over the last even couple years that maybe certain strands of a DAO has come up. So you won't see an Uber kind of DAO, but already within the crypto space, you can see these sort of investment funds that are entirely like run by DAOs. There's no company that has been set up. There's no legal entity. It's just a bunch of people online in internet forums, and they all put money into a crypto address that has smart contract code powering it. And at no point would, let's say, me as a participant have concerns that someone within that internet forum would have the power to run away with all that money, because it's already baked into the code that only with certain mechanisms that money that's inside can be spent. And again, even that is still very in its earliest stages. A lot of cases now are like semi-decentralized. There are certain trusted entities that still exist, but we can see already that there are groups or companies or people that are already like building these kinds of things, and they have a lot of money behind them. There's like billions of dollars behind these kinds of DAOs. Next is what's called DeFi. If you guys have at all been following crypto or blockchain over the last couple of years, especially over the last 1 year, DeFi is a huge space that's grown. DeFi is short for decentralized finance, and typically is a pun on defying. So you're defying the sort of central banking kind of industry that exists. It's also called open finance or programmable finance. And you can see there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these kinds of projects out there already. And whatever you can think of in the real world financial space, they probably already exists in this DeFi space. So whether it's raising funds, whether it's an exchange, insurance, lending, all of these already exist in some shape or form. And there are already billions of dollars worth of transactions that have been going on within this space. If you or anyone you know is in the what's called the traditional or legacy finance space, I would strongly encourage you to just try out DeFi. You don't have to do it to make money, but just to understand how these things work. And when I say this, it's not using an exchange. It's not using your Coinbase or your Luno exchange to like buy some Bitcoin or Ether, but it's actually getting that cryptocurrency, like withdrawing it to a wallet that you actually control entirely, and using any of these programs out there. Because no matter how much I describe these things to you, only when you have actually done these transactions will you recognize the big difference between how DeFi works and how legacy finance works. And it's my opinion, I might be wrong, but it's my opinion that within, say, the next 5 or at most 10 years, a lot of the traditional financial system will be completely disrupted by this DeFi movement. And this is actually what we will explore in the very next session, which is like a hands-on workshop for you to first set up a wallet and also to try out some of these DeFi applications. One particular example that I love to cover is this thing called Uniswap. So Uniswap is what's called a decentralized exchange, and specifically an automated market maker. If you know about exchanges or you listened to the first session that I gave, so one problem with exchanges is that it's actually against the very idea of decentralization, because you have to trust a particular company to hold your money for you. Whereas, the whole point of crypto is that it's decentralized and you are in control of your own money. So in the last couple years, these decentralized exchanges have come up where it's again run by smart contract code. So no one can take away your money and take it and put it in their own wallet, because it's completely controlled by the smart contract code. So with Uniswap, I can trade, let's say, my Ether for any cryptocurrency out there without having to trust someone to hold on to my Ether in between. It's done automatically when I make a transaction. If the transaction is matched, then immediately the contract code will take my Ether from my wallet and take an equivalent amount and transfer it to my wallet. And that's all it can do, because that's all the code allows it to do. And Uniswap has grown significantly. It's now got, if I'm not mistaken, hundreds of billions of dollars of transactions within a day, more than even some of the biggest centralized exchanges in the world. And you can imagine if at some point we tokenize real world assets, then you can have your local stock exchange be run similarly to Uniswap. There's no stock broker that you have to trust or that you have to call. You just use smart contract code, make transactions directly from a wallet that you control entirely. And you can buy, let's say, the stock of a company like Apple or Tesla or what have you. And whether it's the NASDAQ or the Malaysian stock exchange, you can use it at any time and from anywhere in the world, because there's no human that needs to be there to execute these transactions for you. So it's 24/7. Anyone can use it. Another example, very quickly, of DeFi is what's called a stable coin. So one of the common complaints made against Bitcoin specifically and other currencies, that cryptocurrencies that came after it, is that it's extremely volatile, right? So if you want to use it for payment, I don't want to send like $1,000 worth of Bitcoin to my friend, and by the time he gets it, it's worth like $500. It's not very useful for making payments or transactions. So there are these things called stable coins, and a lot of them are what's called centralized stable coins. So they claim to have, let's say, US dollar reserves in their bank account, and they print these US dollar tokens to represent those US dollars. And you still have to trust that those reserves exist. So that's a big problem with these centralized stable coins. But there are what's called decentralized stablecoins or algorithmic stablecoins, where you are using collateral of other currencies to back the minting of these new tokens. So, for example, I can create this DAI, which is tied to $1, by collateralizing or basically locking up, let's say, $2 worth of Ether or the Ether, which is the currency of Ethereum. And there is code that will automatically liquidate my position if the price of Ether drops to, let's say, $1.3 or the reserves backing my $1 worth of DAI drops from $2 to 1.3. So it's a form of over collateralization, and it's actually very similar to something that already exists in the real world, which is pawnbroking. So if you're ever familiar with pawnbroking, that's where, let's say, you have a gold necklace that belongs to your grandma, or you just have gold bullion at home, and you want to still own that gold, but you are in need of short-term cash. So what you do is you give that gold to the pawnbroker. They will lock it up, and they will give you a loan with a little bit of interest, so that you have cash that you can spend. So you can spend your cash, make sure you can repay it, and then you can get back your gold necklace or gold bullion. So it's very similar to this, except it's automated. And having these stable coins have also changed the game for a lot of people, because now you can use cryptocurrency to trade or to pay each other anywhere in the world without having too much of a concern about volatility of the currency you're using. Yeah, so there's a couple other stuff, but I think this might be a bit more advanced. I'll just touch a little bit. One thing that's come up very recently, again in the last 1 year, is this thing called yield farming. And to be honest, a lot of them sound very much like Ponzi's. There's a term called Ponzi-nomics, but it actually, beyond those kinds of Ponzi stuff, there's actually a very interesting fundraising mechanism that's happening. So the idea with all these yield farming tokens, another term for it is liquidity mining. So a lot of them are, for example, decentralized exchanges or financial applications that need a lot of liquidity. So imagine if you're a stock market, but there are not enough people trading in your market, or let's just say it's a bazaar or a pasar malam, as we call it in Malaysia. Like imagine you have a pasar malam, but there's not many shops or stalls out there. There's not liquidity, so there's not like enough customers, there's not enough merchants. So you run into this catch-22, like you need customers or you need merchants for customers to come, but you need customers for merchants to want to set up. So with this liquidity mining thing, it's like, as a company, I give you stock of my company for you to either be a merchant or be a customer at my market. So I'm incentivizing you to start, and after you started and you're already making money, then at some point I might not need to give you these incentives anymore. And it's not much different from startups giving like massive discounts for their products from a marketing budget that they got from their VCs when they raised funds. This is just giving pseudo equity to their users, which they basically print out of thin air. And much as I say it's Ponzi-nomics, it has actually birthed a lot of very impactful kind of financial applications in the DeFi space that now has a lot of users that are on there and using them organically. So an analogy in the real world is like if you have, let's say, your bank and let's just say Grab or Uber. If you're a driver or a passenger, then Uber will give you a little bit of their stock every single time you use it. And imagine you can go to the stock market and sell this Uber stock immediately. And you can take the profits and you can go to your bank. Let's say it's JP Morgan or Maybank for me locally. And you can lend that money or deposit that money into the bank. And whenever you do that, the bank will give you returns from your deposits, but also in the form of equity of their bank, a little bit of an amount, which you can also go immediately to the public markets and sell. So when I said Ponzi-nomics, a lot of this happens where there's like a cycle of, you get some incentive money from here, you put it in somewhere else to get even more incentive money, and there's like a whole cycle that goes around. Again, potentially a lot of them are Ponzi's, and much like with any bubble, at some point it might fail, but there will be some who will remain and who will become the sort of the Facebooks or the Amazons of this new generation of Web3. So there's certain examples. So the blue one is Yearn Finance, which is a robo-advisor. Yam Finance, which is does a rebasement. And Sushi Swap, similar to Uniswap, which is also an automated market maker or decentralized exchange. There are other users beyond just finance. Finance can be a bit awkward to talk about sometimes because it's all about making money for many people. But there are users beyond just speculation or trading. So, for example, you can create a domain service. So there's already a project called Ethereum Name Service where you can create a name. You can buy that name and you can tie it to your wallet address. And anywhere you go, people can, instead of having to look up your very long string of characters that represent your address, they can just type your name and .eth. And you can also tie a website to that name. And even more amazing idea is you can use your wallet address with that name as your social sign-in. So instead of having to enter an email or password to sign up for an application, or trust centralized entities like Facebook or Google to log in using their account, you can log in using a wallet address that you control entirely, and you never have to worry about sharing any private details with any third parties. And this is extremely powerful, and we're in the very early stages of people using their blockchain domain services as a form of identity. And a lot of things can be built on top of that identity that you have. If you use websites a lot, there is this browser called Brave, which was created by the founder of Mozilla. So it's an interesting thing where you get shown ads, and for a lot of people, you get shown ads, and websites like harvest or mine your personal data to like show ads and bring profits to companies like Facebook. But in this case, when you get shown ads, you actually get paid a little bit of money or this token that backs this browser. So you actually get paid money for being shown ads. So that creates a new kind of product than what we're used to in the current internet or Web 2. Then this is also one of those things that have completely ballooned up over since the beginning of the year. What's called NFTs or non-fungible tokens. A lot of people right now see this crypto art or NFT art where you can prove that you have the ownership of a particular piece of art. So it's as if you are able to prove that you own the Mona Lisa. And it's not so much being able to enjoy the beauty of the art, because anyone can just copy and paste it in digital format, but it's more about having that bragging rights or that reputation of being able to say, I own this piece of art that everyone loves so much. And it also becomes a form of establishing credibility. So for example, if you get certain NFTs, which you can only receive by participating in some sort of action or attending some sort of event, then 2 years later, people can look at your gallery of NFTs and you can prove that you actually attended a particular event or did a particular action by showing them your list of NFTs. So yeah, it applies to much more than just simple art. Art is just barely the first use case of NFTs. People are already experimenting and successfully doing games using NFTs. And there are a lot more things that we can do. Just imagine anything where you can, you want an asset that isn't fungible to be able to exist in the digital space. One very popular example is this game called Axie Infinity. Last year, COVID has affected everyone in the world, and there were actually people in the Philippines that made a living out of playing this game, where by playing a game you get rewarded with certain points or tokens that you can trade outside afterwards. So yeah, this is actually one example of it actually having real meaningful impact to people's lives. There are also what's called community currencies. So the left image here shows the Sarafu, which is a community inclusion currency done in Kenya by this project called Grassroots Economics. And it enables the community to not just receive financial aid as a one-off, where people maybe give them food or drinks and that's all they get and it finishes. But the financial aid that people give can be used to power an economy, because it can be used to back a local currency. And because a local currency then exists, the people locally can can trade with each other. So the impact of financial aid gets multiplied more than just the one time that they would have otherwise. Another example is Reddit, which is an extremely popular social media website. And they're experimenting with these community currencies that represents different subreddits. And you can get rewarded with these by doing things that are to the benefit of that particular community. And you can spend it by, let's say, sort of advertising on the subreddit header or tipping it to different people within the community, and many different kinds of community usage that have barely been explored. There's also what's called a personal token. A bunch of these have been experimented. One notable case is this one by Spencer Dinwiddie, who is an NBA player for the Brooklyn Nets. He actually created a bond that allowed sort of his fans or people out there to invest in. And so he gets this initial capital, and they will get paid based on his NBA salary over the next few years with a little bit of extra. And in this way, he gets to get initial capital that he can use for different ventures, and his fans can invest in his future success. And beyond just the financial benefit that they might get, they can also have like a closer community with Spencer. And Spencer could also do things like create special like VIP events or special merchandise that he can give out to these people who hold his personal or fan tokens. So again, this is very early stage. A lot of people are still experimenting with it. One idea could be if you're a student and you don't want to get a student loan that cripples you from all for the next 30-40 years of your life, you could potentially create a personal token with people that you know and trust, or people that can look at your prior background and they can invest in your future, and they get paid based on your future income. So I come from the insurance space, so this is pretty interesting to me. There's this thing called Parametric Insurance, where typically with most insurance products, you have to, when something bad happens, you have to have some sort of claims process. Someone needs to check whether the event actually did happen or whether there is some sort of fraud. So it always takes some time before that claim amount can be sent to the beneficiary. And in certain cases, such as, let's say, with a hurricane insurance, by the time that the damages have been calculated and checked and verified and the money gets sent, you might not be alive anymore because the hurricane might have hit your house and damaged everything that's inside, including you and your family. But imagine a world where with satellite technology, we can do highly accurate predictions of where hurricanes might happen, let's say within a few hours of it hitting. And if you have claim amounts that can be given out based on smart contract code, there's no humans that need to check, but the smart contract can check the satellite data and see that there is a, say, 99.5% chance of the hurricane hitting this city in the next, say, 5 or 6 hours. Then we can make that payment go through immediately, and it can go to this family who's living in that city, and they might not have much funds, but with that money now they can use to purchase goods or buy fuel to put in their car so that they can get them and their families to safety before the claim event or the hurricane hits them. So it's actually insurance that can potentially save lives instead of just provide recompense after lives have been lost or damaged. Another one is this microcredit. So there's a project called InfoCorp who are based in Singapore, Myanmar, Argentina, a bunch of different places, and it allows people like farmers who have assets such as their livestock, but typically are not provided financial services by banks because it's very difficult for banks to to verify the value of these assets, because the cows can die, the cows can disappear. But you can have technology that tracks. You can put a chip, let's say, in the cow's ear, which is actually what is done here, and that tracks whether the cow is alive, whether where it is, and so the bank can at any time check where that cow is and know that the asset that is used to collateralize any lending that the farmer gets. So they can base off of that. And if the farmer kind of defaults on his loan, for example, the bank can go and repossess that cow and sell it off, or do whatever it needs to do. Some other examples are there are these kind of economic theories that have only existed in theory. We've never been able to do it with our sort of modern fiat financial system, but with a smart contract backed currency, we can do a bunch of these more automated kind of transactions. So, for example, you can have what's called a Harburger tax, where imagine you have a advertising space on the website, and you want to be able to have advertisers sort of advertise on that space, but you could do it in such a way where instead of they pay once a month and they block it out for a whole month, they can bid in an auction, and if they win, let's say they pay $10,000, then they get that spot for as long as they want, and they can set the price that that spot is worth. So let's say if they set it at $10,000, then as long as someone else out there pays $10,000, the other person will get to claim this spot. But if no one makes that payment, then they have to pay a tax of, let's say, 1% in a year. So they have to pay 1% out of 10,000, maybe not per year, maybe per month. But they have to pay that continuously to be able to still own that advertising space. So you unlock certain sort of economic transactions that were unable to be done before you can automate these kinds of transactions. There's also things you can do, such as quadratic finance, where the idea is you can provide funds to grants, and those funds can be matched by different grant providers. So let's say if 10 people donate $10, then it will be matched automatically by this big grant provider. And the problem with a lot of these kinds of like grant providing is that the grant providers may not be the most knowledgeable about which grants are worth funding, because they're just one party. They have funds. Let's say they're the government. They have funds, but they don't know which NGOs or which projects are worth providing more funds for. Whether they are like using their funds responsibly and so on. But the people on the ground are the people who know best about which grants are worth helping or contributing to. So let's say, imagine there's a bunch of volunteers and there's a bunch of NGOs. So the volunteers who are actively volunteering, they know which NGOs are actually doing their job well and which ones are just maybe taking money and doing some fancy dinners without helping the people that they're supposed to help. And the volunteers can allocate these funds much better than the grant provider. And if they provide their own money, $10, $50 and so on, and based on the amount that is given by these volunteers, and the number of people that allocate to these funds, then the grant providers can match based on the decisions made by the people on the ground. So it's done like without the grant provider having to make the decisions themselves beyond a certain initial level of qualification, but it's like the decisions are made by people on the ground who know the ground reality better than the people in the sort of centralized entities that just have the funds. So in short, what smart contracts allow you to have are decentralized applications. So think back about the Apple example I gave with the iPhone. Like anyone can create applications, but there will still always be a gatekeeper like Apple, like Google in Android's case, who can still censor you from creating certain applications if they don't like it, and who can still charge a tax on every single application that has been made and payment that is given to these applications. Another way to think of it is now, instead of just decentralized money, it's also programmable money. So you can program your transactions to be done based on certain conditions that can happen. And my favorite way of describing it is it's unstoppable applications. No one in the world can stop some of these applications if they exist on a smart contract. So an example is the Uniswap decentralized exchange that I mentioned earlier. And this is a real example, by the way. They are based out of the US. And so the US government has actually blocked them from allowing to provide their services to people in countries such as Iran because of sanctions that go on. So Uniswap can block Iranians from accessing their website, but the smart contract that powers the Uniswap can be accessed by anyone in the world because the smart contract already exists. There's no human that can control what happens to the smart contract. So even though the window to access the Uniswap smart contract has been blocked to Iranians, anyone in the world can create their own mirrors of Uniswap's website or even their own interface, point it to the smart contract of Uniswap, and then Iranians can still trade on Uniswap. So even though the most powerful government in the world has blocked Uniswap from providing their services to Iranians, they cannot force Uniswap to stop anyone from using the contracts themselves. So it's a completely different kind of space where you can have unstoppable, uncensorable applications that can be used by anyone in the world. So these are some local companies and communities. I think I'm going to skip them for now. An important note on the culture of the different communities in the space. So within the blockchain or cryptocurrency space, there are a lot of different people, a lot of different groups or communities. It can be extremely tribal, such that you can ask like 5 different people their opinions about a certain blockchain or certain project, and they might give you 5 different opinions. And they all sound smart, and you don't know which one you should believe or take their word for. So some kind of cultural things to note that definitely helped me figure it out over time, and I hope can help you who's listening. The first thing to note is that there are a lot of what's called shills in the space. So all they're interested in is shilling their coin. So maybe they bought Bitcoin like 5 years ago, and they have like 90% of their wealth in Bitcoin. So it's in their best interest to tell you that, all these other currencies out there are scams, are useless, and you should only ever buy Bitcoin because it's the only one that is useful and will benefit the world. And it's not just Bitcoin. It can be anything. It can be Ethereum. It can be some other random cryptocurrency out there. So it's very important when you're talking to someone to understand what their incentives are for telling you their opinions. And usually if you ask a couple of questions, ask them what their position is in that coin, then usually you can kind of figure out if there is any hidden interests when they are telling you these things. So beyond just that, there are there is a scale of 2 extremes when it comes to the blockchain space. There are those who are very rigid or intransigent, and they will say that hard money is the only use case of a blockchain. So these are typically the Bitcoiners. And there's no right or wrong, at least in my opinion. It's just a philosophical understanding of the blockchain technology, given its limitations. It can only be used as money that is fully decentralized, that is not controlled by any government, and you should never use it for these other experimental things like identity and lending and social reputation and so on. And on the opposite end of the scale, there are the people who want to experiment and do everything on the blockchain. They want to do music and games and social media and everything that you can think of. They just want to blockchain the world. So there's a scale of two extremes, and as always, it's always good to be somewhere in between. And another way of describing this is you can think of the rigid end of the scale as people who see blockchain as it should have a very limited surface area. So think of a triangle. There's only that much surface area, so what's happening at all times. You can see everything that's happening in that flat surface. Whereas if you have some extremely complicated shape, which I forget the name of this shape here, but just imagine a shape that is extremely complicated, has a lot of corner cases, a lot of hidden shadowy areas that you can't keep track of. Then that's where potentially a lot of security issues can happen. People can find some bug in the code or some way that it's behaving that it's not meant to behave, and so it's much more risky to have blockchains that have a huge surface area. Again, I want to emphasize that at this point, at least in my opinion, there is no right or wrong. We're still in a stage within the technology that it's impossible to say which philosophy is the right one, and time will tell. So I'll end with the so what. Why should any of this matter to you who's listening? First, it's to understand that this is a defining technology that will change the world. People like to say that blockchain now is like the internet in the mid-90s or maybe just before the dot-com bubble. It's still early stage. There's still a lot of problems. You still have your dial-up modems where you can't really connect as well to the space. Secondly, it's an investment. It's a potentially profitable investment, but it's also extremely high risk. And if you want to invest in any of these, understand that there's a lot of risk, and you should never put more money than you can afford to lose. I like to describe it as, imagine Google in before 2000. If you could invest in them back then, now you would have profits in the multiples of returns. But you could not have invested in Google. Like you could have maybe bought Yahoo instead, or Netscape, or any of these projects back then that didn't survive until today. There's no way for you to know until time has passed and you can see things in hindsight. And there's also the fact that the technology itself is very early stage, and it might come to a point where it doesn't work or it doesn't scale, and it doesn't live up to the potential that people like me see in it. So that's all possible. So keep that in mind. And lastly, second last is understand the impact to your career. So if you work in finance, like I mentioned just now, it potentially could disrupt the entire industry worldwide, and you might not have a job if you don't understand how these things work and are able to leverage or contribute to it. And lastly is to help the community grow. So whether you're a programmer, a product person, a lawyer, academic, or whatever you are, there's always things you can do to help contribute to the space. The internet as we now know it, for maybe a long time ago, there was a lot of talk about how the internet might not be public. Like it might have these separate walled off gardens that is owned by corporations, and you don't have full access to different parts of the internet. And we already see that happening more and more now, where certain parts of the internet are maybe walled off to Facebook or Google or Amazon. And with the internet that we have and the public access that people have, it's only from the efforts of many people around the world to push for an internet that is public and open and accessible, that we have the current internet that we have. And so it's the same for blockchains. Like, there are corporations, governments, people who want to control big chunks of the blockchain space. And it's only from the efforts of people like you and me who will fight for an open, permissionless, public blockchains that this can end up that way, and we don't end up in this world of gardens. So yeah, I would say if you're in Malaysia, join Ethereum Malaysia. If not, join your local communities or many other of these online communities out there that are not tied to any geography, and contribute in the way that you can. So if you're interested, I can talk more about this later on. Like, for my community in Malaysia, we can do projects. We can that potentially can help your own resume when you want to apply for jobs. And there's even potential incubators that we can introduce people to fund their projects. So to review what we covered from the first and second session, we covered some basic concepts like the common terms, preamble concepts like money and decentralization, some features of blockchain 1.0. Today we covered blockchain 2.0, its use cases, and some note on communities, and finally the so what. If you can't remember anything else, this is one of the first session actually, but remember that blockchains are not anonymous. You are your own security, and exchanges are not wallets. And this is just the beginning. There are a lot of other topics you can dive into. It's pretty much endless. And next month, we will actually do a hands-on workshop where you will learn to set up your own wallet and use a couple of these DeFi applications out there to understand how you can work with these decentralized applications. Yeah, so if you have any feedback on the talk, please feel free to share. You can use the QR node or QR code, or enter the text and leave any feedback. It's anonymous. You don't have to worry. And if you're Malaysian and you want to start investing in cryptocurrency, you can use this referral code. And when you buy Bitcoin, both you and me will get some little bit of reward. So that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot for listening, and let me see. I'm a bit over time. Oh, apologies, guys. It looks like I didn't show the screen. I actually went full screen, so I thought that should have worked. I can share the slides with the organizers later, and they can share it to the people who are watching. Thanks a lot for sharing the link. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we will do the hands-on workshop next month. Bye, everyone.